The finance industry thrives on data management. It brings many challenges and many opportunities too.
Well, our next guest has raised the issue of what risks data can introduce that are not being properly addressed. And he questions whether risk frameworks are up to the job of highlighting and indeed providing oversight of new data risks.
Welcome to Tony Fish, Managing Director of Digital 20, who joins us now from London. Good morning to you, Tony. It's wonderful to have you here.
Good morning, Johnny. Good morning, Juliet.
Tony, how do we explore, explain and indeed manage complex data risk?
Oh, it's the one thing I have to say before I start is I'm going to miss you two tomorrow morning because you've brought a little spark into my life every morning. So I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. And Sibos is just such a wonderful place to check, and what you've been doing for me is our sense of what we're picking up about data, what the market's saying about data. And, you know, just listening to the last two with Annette and Chris, they're reflections about what people are saying. And picking up the agenda and data is right there. And listening to, you know, Alison Rose and Nicholas Stern and Todd Gibbons and Javier, Matt Cumming and Jim, all of them came up with many of the same new questions that are being thrown up. And it's that the CEOs and boards and executive teams across the industry have got a pile of new problems. And part of them is very simple, you know, should they pay dividends? The whole ESG agenda that's come up, and data is this third piece, which actually links the first two together. And what COVID's done right now is exposed an urgency. And it's an urgency that's raised a pile of questions, and it's questions that we as an industry and we as individuals hadn't really thought about. And kind of like we depended on time to be able to think about them. And what's happening right now is all the big management consultancies, Harvard Business Review, they're all publishing really, really fast papers on this particular series of agendas. And I'll just sort of go through that, which is we've got a pile of short-term questions which we sit there at the board and executive teams asking. And they're all about next quarter results and performance and efficiency. And that's been the bedrock of what we've done for a long time. But suddenly we've got to put back on risk and safety. And safety's become an issue which we kind of like didn't have to address, but we were all accountable for. And now we've got to get data around what safety means for our staff. And we don't know what data we need to be able to make a judgment about what is safe. And even picking up market data to determine safety as well. So the classic compliance model that we had isn't actually doing what we need right now, which is how do we make our staff safe? If you go for the long-term questions, which were timeless questions the industry has always faced, are we heading towards our North Star? Is it the right North Star? And kind of like the big corporate governance ideologies and big strategies. And now with ESG coming in, and are we going to be better ancestors and how do we not burn the earth? Classic governance as effectiveness actually has a pile of new questions, which we need data to make those judgment calls. And which data sets do we actually need, and how do we know they are the right data sets? But it's the medium term where everything really is starting to hit the road, which is the 1 to 3 years. And it's become substantially harder. And the reason it's become so much harder is because data, automation, ethics, innovation sit in the 1 to 3 year time frame. And it's the skills we need. And the classic CEO thinking was, let's go find and retain the right skills. But the right skills rested on we were doing the same thing. And what data and COVID has come along with a pile of urgency is we're not doing the same thing. So what right skills do we now need? And the data issues that are coming up is that we just don't understand what decisions we're being asked to make. And because we don't know what decisions we're being asked to make, we're finding we don't actually know what data sets we've got. So the risk frameworks around, is somebody going to hack our system? All of the classic pieces are really well thought of. The new frameworks that are coming on, how do we make better decisions with our data, and the lineage and provenance of data is proving tremendously difficult.
Just on board responsibilities, exec CEOs, who's accountable, however, when delegated authority is automated?
Yeah, and it's such a spot-on question, Johnny, because it raises this sort of serious question that we've got, which we don't really understand. And I suppose there's only one way to do it, is to pick up an example, which is the directors have delegated, and these are the directors at the board, have delegated at some previous board meeting an authority to, let's pick the HR director. And part of that remit was go find the right staff and the right people in the right roles that match our skills, our culture, and our ability. And over time, HR built up a body of knowledge and work practices that allowed the company to effectively find, retain the right talent. What the CFO did a few years ago, though, and at some point they basically looked at each department and said, look, you've got to become more efficient. And therefore, the way to do efficiency was to drive automation. So the automation driven agenda started 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And in process, we've had to automate. So right now, what HR is actually doing is running an algorithm. And the algorithm is built on the data set they built up. And the data set was, how do we match the right people to do the right job in the right way? And now what we've done is we've supported that decision by social media, LinkedIn, and effectively able to pick the right person. And actually, we don't even need to interview them because we can set out via a chatbot and then we can send out terms. And this isn't, this is in some roles, actually, this is what we're doing. The same work that we gave to the HR director is now being performed by an algorithm. So the delegated authority is now no longer a person, but is actually an algorithm. And the questions that are coming up is, while the responsibility 100% sits with the HR director, we've now got to ask the HR director to become an expert in data, because they've got to understand the data that went into the algorithm and the biases. And they're particular issues that are coming up all over Sibos. The machine, is that now responsible? If it is, what risk profile and where in our risk profile, to your opening question, is this question coming up? Because our risk profile never had this as a question in our framework to say, ooh, we've got an automated algorithm with delegated authority. How do we know it's making the right choices?
So one of many big questions which sadly we're unable to address in the little time that we have. But look, Tony Fish, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Please do enjoy the rest of Sibos 2020. But that was Tony Fish, Managing Director of Digital 20.